Brisbane is the capital of Queensland in Australia and is located in the southeast corner of the state. It is situated on the banks of the Brisbane River and is the third most populous city in Australia. The history of Brisbane can be traced back to the indigenous people who lived in the area for thousands of years before European settlement. It is believed that Aboriginal people first reached Australia around 60,000 years ago. This estimate is based on archaeological evidence such as the discovery of ancient tools and human remains, as well as genetic studies of modern Aboriginal populations. They had a diverse and sophisticated system of hunting, gathering, and fishing that allowed them to live off the land and sea. They were expert hunters, using a variety of weapons such as boomerangs, spears, and clubs to hunt animals such as kangaroos, wallabies, possums, and emus. They also fished in rivers, estuaries and coastal waters using traps, spears and fishing lines. Gathering was also an important part of their diet, with a wide variety of fruits and berries being collected. They also collected shellfish, insects, and other small animals. Overall, their diet was rich and varied, and allowed them to thrive in the diverse environments found across Australia. The first European to explore the area was Matthew Flinders, who arrived in 1799. He named the river after Sir Thomas Brisbane, the Governor of New South Wales. Flinders was an English navigator, cartographer, and hydrographer best known for his exploration of the coast of Australia. He was the first person to circumnavigate Australia and to demonstrate that it was a single landmass, rather than a group of islands. He also named the country Australia in 1804, and his work helped establish the current map of the continent. In 1823, John Oxley explored the area and recommended it as a suitable place for a settlement. The first settlement was established in 1824, and it was named after the Governor Thomas Brisbane. In the early days, Brisbane was a small, isolated settlement with a population of only a few hundred people. It was mainly used as a penal colony, and the convicts were used to clear the land and build roads and buildings. The city grew slowly, and it was not until the mid-19th century that it began to develop into a more significant town. In the 1850s, the discovery of gold in the nearby regions led to an influx of people and a significant increase in the city's population. This was also the time when the city began to develop into an important port and commercial centre. Brisbane was also involved in the War of Southern Queensland in the 1840s and 50s between the indigenous population and the settlers. Thousands of the Aboriginal people were killed. On the night of September 13, 1864, the city suffered what became known as the Great Fire of Brisbane. The fire broke out in a timber yard on the north bank of the Brisbane River and quickly spread to surrounding buildings, including warehouses, shops, and homes. The fire burned for several hours and destroyed a large portion of the city centre, including many of the city's major buildings and businesses. It was a devastating event for the city and its residents. During the 20th century, Brisbane continued to grow and develop. The construction of the Story Bridge in the 1930s was an important milestone, and it helped to link the north and south sides of the river. The city also played an important role during World War II. During the war, Brisbane was a major base for the Australian military and the Allied forces. The city also served as a major port and logistics hub, with many troops passing through on their way to the front lines in the Pacific. Brisbane was also a major centre for military training and hospitals, with many Australian and American soldiers receiving training and medical treatment in the city. The city was also home to a large number of American military personnel. Additionally, Brisbane was the target of several air raids by the Japanese during the war, but the city was not heavily damaged. However, the city's residents were still affected by the war and the threat of attack, with many of them being evacuated to the nearby towns and rural areas, and blackout and rationing measures were in place. After the war, Brisbane became a major centre for demobilisation and returning troops, and the city's economy boomed as a result of the increased activity and investment during the war. In the post-war years, Brisbane experienced rapid growth and development, and it became one of the most important cities in Australia. The construction of the Gateway Bridge in the 1980s was an important milestone and helped to further develop the city. In the 21st century, Brisbane has continued to grow and develop, and it is now a vibrant and dynamic city with a population of over 2 million people. Overall, the history of Brisbane is one of slow but steady growth and development. From its early days as a small and isolated settlement, the city has grown to become one of the most important cities in Australia. Today, it is a vibrant and dynamic city with a rich history and culture that has been shaped by both the indigenous people and the European settlers who have called it home.